as we start the third hour here, there will soon be an official vote to put Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court to replace Justice Stephen Breyer. That is going to happen, it appears, within this hour. And the vote will be 53-47, with 3 Republicans joining every Democrat to vote in support of her nomination. Susan Collins, Republican of Maine. We talked about this earlier in the week, Buck. I don't have an issue with Susan Collins' decision because she has staked out the principle that you should defer to the president when it comes to his choice for the Supreme Court. Same position she took with Brett Kavanaugh, with Amy Coney Barrett, with prior Democratic nominations, and now with Ketanji Brown Jackson. You can agree or disagree with that. I actually think Susan Collins has proven that that is her principle, and I respect her for standing on it. Lisa Murkowski out of Alaska, who is up for re-election this year. And Buck, Alaska has an interesting ranked choice voting process, which makes me believe that this is a directly political decision by Lisa Murkowski. I find, in terms of the Supreme Court, her decision not to vote for Brett Kavanaugh to be such a bad choice that I personally, if I lived in Alaska, would not vote for her for the Senate, because she got it, in my opinion, 100% wrong on Brett Kavanaugh.
Unforgivable.
Which is why, yes.
Unforgivable.
Which is,
Sorry.
Which is why I'm not, no, you're right. Which is why I'm not inclined to give her the benefit of the doubt on this decision. But the guy that is making the worst choice, the person who is, I believe, become an embarrassment to the state of Utah that he represents, is Mitt Romney. And we went off on him a couple of days ago, but I'm still fired up about it, Buck, because not only is he voting for Ketanji Brown Jackson, he voted against the removal of the mask mandate. He declined to vote on whether or not Joe Biden should be able to put in place a vaccine mandate. And this is so incredibly significant, Buck, he voted against Ketanji Brown Jackson for a prior judicial appointment, and now he's supporting her for the Supreme Court, which makes no sense. He didn't think she was entitled to sit on the federal judiciary for a much less significant role, and now he thinks she is for a more significant role. It's nonsensical.
You remember one of the really tough moments for John Kerry?
Yes,
when he was running for president was, I voted for the Iraq War before I was against it. You know, he had that whole line.
Yes.
And everyone, and then you had people at the pro Bush rallies, saying flip flop, flip flop.
Yeah.
That became, and then John. I remember the media tried to say, or I think it was John Kerry tried to say that that we need to have more nuance, and then everyone started saying that nuance was just a fancy French word for flip flop. I mean, it was great. Flip flop was something. I think people were actually carrying them around with them too at some of these rallies. But this is Mitt Romney doing essentially the same thing. He was against Ketanji Brown Jackson's elevation to the federal bench before he was for it, or yes, against it before for it. I can't even keep it straight.
He was against it. Now he's for it.
Now he's for it. Thank you.
Yes,
he was against it.
That's actually the opposite of what Lindsey Graham did, and some people have been in the left-wing press critical of Lindsey Graham. But let me say this: I actually understand that on some level, because you can say, well, for a relatively low-level judicial appointment, I'm willing to give her a chance to see how she does. And then based on what her record is, I now believe she's not entitled to get a promotion to the federal bench, to the Supreme Court. That is easier to understand for me than she doesn't deserve the low-level job, but now she deserves the high-level job.
There's a logical consistency at play there that, yes, I think it's also more a political. We're going to be realistic and honest with everybody always. It's more politics, I think, than when Lindsey Graham is saying, well, at that level, I mean, federal bench is a big right.
It's easier to defend that trajectory than the one Romney's
It's
doing.
not. The Romney defense is absurd. I mean, the Romney defense makes me I still sit here and say, I can't believe this guy was the Republican nominee, and he was. But then you think, well, he was the governor of Massachusetts, and then he moved to like a $50 million mansion on the beach in San Diego, and now he's the governor of, the senator from Utah. I will say, though, one thing that we do, I think, pretty well is we try to hold the right to account here when necessary. I like to think of it like we're coaches, right? We want to win the game, but you've coached, I've coached. Sometimes you got to tell the team, get your stuff together, boys. You got to get out there and you got to do a better job, right? On the other side of this, though, we should point out that's the Romney aspect of this. Republicans were, first of all, a lot of them are voting against Ketanji Brown Jackson. They don't care they're going to be called racist for this, as the left will. They don't care. But more importantly, because that's just nonsense. But more importantly, they really asked some questions and they decided they were going to give a real confirmation hearing in this era of hyper-politicized Supreme Court appointments. Republicans didn't entirely roll over. I will say a little bit of a surprise to me, actually, the fact that they really pushed. I mean, the issue of being soft on child pornography sentences really did get a national conversation here about this justice. Ted Cruz was very vocal about, among others, Josh Hawley and others, about how she may be the most left-wing activist judge of all time. I do think it's really hard to be more left-wing than Sotomayor, but let's just say it's at least possible. So the Republicans, they made some, look, they didn't have the vote, so it's easy for them too, right? Because they're not going to be making a deciding vote one way or the other. But they made some noise on this one. They actually put up something of a fight. Maybe it was just optics, but at least they didn't roll over.
What about Marsha Blackburn's "What is a woman?" question, which to me crystallized how illegitimate the conversation has become as it pertains to transgender activism in so many different levels. But I also want to give Mitt Romney a chance to explain himself on this vote.
Should we get Mitt Romney on the show, Clay? Should we invite him? But everyone listening, you guys cannot change the dial if we have Mitt Romney on to explain himself. All right, that's the deal.
If Mitt Romney wants to come on and defend the last three votes that I all disagree with, and I bet, Buck, a lot of our audience disagrees, certainly with the mask mandate vote as it pertains to
our
planes.
phone lines lit up like a Christmas tree on Monday.
Yeah. The fact that he also voted declined to show up, which is, I don't know what his excuse was, but declined to show up to vote against Biden's vaccine mandate. And now he's going to vote in favor of Ketanji Brown Jackson after first being against it. Here is Mitt Romney explaining his John Kerry flip-flop-like decision.
In the prior confirmation, I was concerned that she was outside the mainstream. And as a result of our meeting for an hour together and reviewing her testimony before Congress, I became convinced that she's within the mainstream. She's also a highly qualified, intelligent, a capable person, and I wish her the very best.
Okay, so all this says to me is, and I'm saying this as a lawyer, all right, Mitt Romney did not do his homework on the first vote when he opposed her. Because that's really what this tells me. He's saying, first of all, you talked to her for an hour? I'm sorry. You're giving her a lifetime appointment? If you can't do a decent job of being a likable person in a 1-hour meeting, you are, first of all, probably socially maladroit on many different levels. But to say, I talked to her for an hour, well, Mitt Romney, to my knowledge, is not a legal scholar. So what kind of conversation is he having? It's not like he's probing in a sophisticated way her understanding of the Constitution. And again, he said, I now believe she's in the mainstream. So you thought she wasn't in the mainstream. Her opinions are certainly not in the mainstream. And then you change your mind and decide to vote for her. So either you did a shoddy job in your initial vetting of her when you voted against her, or you are doing a shoddy job now, because there should be some consistency in your opinion of her as a jurist, given that you are now promoting her to lifetime tenure and giving her the greatest job in terms of influence that a lawyer can have in this country. So I'd love for Mitt Romney to come on this show and attempt to explain all three of those votes, because I think our audience would like to hear, particularly because, Buck, we're number one in Salt Lake City, and I imagine a lot of his constituents are listening right now.
Tucker on his show earlier in the week was also calling out the governor, I believe Governor Cox of Utah.
For going against that transgender bill.
Transgender. You've had a number of people. You had the governor of South Dakota say she would sign something about transgender sports and then did not. You have the governor of, I think the governor of Mississippi. Or was that,
Kentucky.
Or is it Arkansas? One of those.
Arkansas. It was
Arkansas
that went against it.
Governor
too.
of Arkansas went against it. Sorry, Mississippi. My bad. The governor of everyone Mississippi.
We've had the governor of Mississippi on. He's probably listening right now. Like, why? Why are you throwing me under the bus?
But now the governor of Utah also, and then was overridden by the state legislature, right? So it is important that people see what actually happens in some of these states where you'd think it would just be. Because here's the thing: you never get this. I have to point this out. Blue states, Gavin Newsom. Or I was going to say Cuomo, but it's actually
your girl Hochul.
Hochul, thank you.
Hochul.
My own state governor.
Yeah.
Blanked on her name. I still think of Cuomo as the governor.
By the way, she may have some trouble in your state. Have you seen some of the poll numbers coming out? Like, there's some Republican support. She doesn't have. It doesn't seem like a lot of support right now in the Democratic
Party. I would
Party.
hope that Democrats and even Democrats in New York City at some level would recognize that, like, ruining the state is a bad idea. Just put aside the politics.
Yeah.
Causing hundreds of thousands of people to flee in terror at your awful policies. Maybe we want to change. Maybe we want to change that around. I'm just, call me crazy, but going back to the initial point here, Clay, you never get governors in deep blue states going against their base and either vetoing or signing or whatever legislation that enrages Democrats. But somehow Republican governors, and this is, by the way, it's corporate interests. What this is just bending to corporate interests within their states primarily, and also the donor class, but those things are obviously very much tied together because, even Republican governors, they like to be invited to the fancy clubs and get the big checks for their campaigns.
It's why you need people who just really don't care. I mean, I hate to say it, but stand up for what you believe in, and if people disagree, so what? I mean, I don't understand why you care, right? Like, if people decide they hate me because of my political opinion and they don't want to hang out with me, that just makes my life easier, right? If there's fewer people who want to hang out with me, I'll hang out with the people who like me the most. I don't understand this. And by the way, the state of Kentucky, the governor who's a Democrat, overwhelmingly the Kentucky legislature passed a bill to require high school athletes to compete against their birth certificate sex. Boys compete against boys. Girls compete against girls. The fact that they even have to pass this bill is crazy to me. The Kentucky governor vetoed it too. Now, he's a Democrat, but the governor of Kentucky being a Democrat, he's actually closer to a Republican than some Republicans are, right? I mean, he is as far to the right as you could be. It's just, I know there's a lot of people in Kentucky fired up about this, and I expect the legislature, which passed it on a bipartisan basis, is going to overrule him too. But the fact that happened in Utah, the fact that it's happened anywhere else, that a Republican governor would not sign this bill is, I believe, an embarrassment given what's going on right now.